So, Rabbi Smith, if it's okay with you, I wanted to pick up from where we last stopped last kind of session.
Right.
So we were talking about how much souls know about what's going on in this world. And I had asked you about mediums because you had said to me that in a way, when we interfere with them, when we pray or daven or go to the grave, it's almost pulling them back down here. And so I'd asked you about mediums.
Right. Okay. So I think we have to have a little bit back up. In other words, just to get some clarity over here. There are basically three stages of death, right? There's the first stage, which starts 30 days before, as the neshama begins to leave, right? And then there's a stage of where there's actual death itself. Now, there are two parts to the soul which need to leave. The first is called the ruach, and the second is called the nefesh. Now, the ruach part, I mentioned that if during the person's lifetime the person was making very spiritual choices, then the ruach will move to a higher spiritual dimension. But if during the person's lifetime, the person was making very earthbound, very pleasure-seeking, very this world choices, then the ruach doesn't leave this world. And that's where you get the concept of spirits. That's where you get the concept of mediums. That's where you get the concept of ghosts. That's where you get the concept of people being possessed. These are ruchot, that's why they call them spirits, right, which haven't left and are still hanging around trying to find some way to be released from this world, because it's not a pleasant experience.
Wow, interesting. Are you saying that a medium can only make contact with a ruach that's still around? If somebody's kind of been released, they wouldn't be able to contact them?
Well, I mean, again, that's generally what the situation is. That's generally the idea. There are situations where we find that even in the case of Shmuel Hanavi, Shmuel the prophet, when King Saul wanted to find out what was going to be in the battle against the Plishtim, the Philistines, right? So he went, which is an in itself, but that's not for this situation. He went to a witch, right, and asked her to call up the soul of Shmuel the prophet, to ask him. And when the soul came, the vision, so he was the right way around, and she was very shocked, because the soul world is really a mirror image to our lives. In other words, the soul world is upside down to the way we are. What I mean by that is, just as the right side of your brain controls your left side of your body, right? So as you switch from one world to the next, everything switches. So that's why they say that a person who's will be great there. So then the sages asked, what about us? And they said, no, because you're functioning from a place of truth. You're functioning from a soul world, even in this world. So you're saying great here and saying great there. But what you do see from this is that everything fits. I'll just give you another brief example, is when it's brought that when Rivka was traveling back with Yitzchak to meet Yitzchak, with Eliezer to meet Yitzchak. So it says that she saw him coming and she fell off the camel. So why did she fall off the camel? Because he was coming from Gan Eden. He had been into Gan Eden to daven mincha, and he was coming from Gan Eden and it was upside down. So she got a fright and she fell off. So the witch was expecting Shmuel to come upside down because he's coming from Gan Eden, but he said he came the right way up because in honor of the king, because Shaul was the king. But we see that she was able to make a connection to a higher level, a higher dimension of the spirit of Shaul. So it's not always that's the ones which are earthbound. But in most cases, it's going to be the ones that are earthbound. You know, I once had an interesting situation. I had visited a homeopath, and I can tell these stories, right?
Absolutely. Definitely. Yes.
So I was once visiting a homeopath, and he was using a method to determine what it was that was lacking, which is called in I think you call it in England, you call it dowsing, right? Where you use a pendulum. So he was in this power dowsing method. So I was a bit concerned that this might involve witchcraft. So I approached Rav Scheinberg, Zatzal, about this. And he said, I don't know how it works. So I sent a letter to ask Rav Hassan from Manchester. I don't know if you're familiar with Rav Hassan.
Yes.
So I went asked him, you know, he's from Gibraltar. He was the first person that ever taught me Derech Hashem. So I knew he knew these things. So I asked him. He said he once had a Spanish maid in Gibraltar that used to call up Yoshka to speak with her dead mother. So you see that it depends on the different levels, because obviously you need to appreciate the fact that the spiritual world is not just one place. There are many dimensions to the spiritual world. So everything's on a higher dimension, lower dimension. So the same thing over here, but the vast majority of spirits which we come in contact with in this world, whether it be, you know, in the cemeteries, whether it be in ghost areas or whatever it might be, are from spirits that were left here.
So just to finish that story of what did Rav Scheinberg say? I need to know.
This might be horrible, you know. So he said that the information that comes to the person through the mazalot, through their arms, right? This is what he was telling me, Rav Hassan was telling me. It comes to the person, it comes to their arm, and then from the arm into the pendulum. Now, what Rav Scheinberg was concerned about is how it gets from the arm into the pendulum. That he was a little bit concerned about, and he said, rather, if I'm going to use that, it should be a non-Jew and not a Jew, because it's not forbidden for non-Jews, but it is forbidden for Jews. Kishuf magic. However, there are very strong opinions which hold that dowsing is permitted. So I'm not telling you that dowsing isn't permitted. I'm just telling you what I experienced.
Yes, yes. Well, Rav Scheinberg was my daughter's in-law's great-grandfather, so we'll hold by him.
Okay.
But just to ask you, though, why is a medium so asur? What is it about a medium that's so asur? Why can't we communicate?
Well, there are two reasons. One reason is that in the pasuk, you take a look in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, chapter 18, verses 9 to 14. I think that's where it is, if I'm not mistaken. Do you want me to look it up, or we'll stay with that?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
No, I think it's 10, chapter 10, verses 9 to 14. It speaks about the different forbidden occult practices, right? And then a verse after that, it says that you should go innocent. You should go straight with the Lord your God. In other words, it's a positive commandment that we're obligated to follow innocently, naively, purely with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not to visit these supernatural methods of how to understand the future and how to understand everything that goes on. That's the first thing. The second part, which most people are not aware of, that these spirits can actually harm you. Well, it's not like it's a neutral thing. Mm-hmm. They can actually harm a person. They are forces, after all. They're not just something neutral and natural. These are forces. Specifically, those spirits which are left in this world, they want to get out of this world. And there's, in order to be able to do that, they need to kind of either occupy the body of a person and then use that person as a means of getting out, right? Or they need to find other ways of getting out. And sometimes just somebody who did not work on themselves in their lifetime, right? They remain with who they are even after they die. If they were a person that was a type of person that was looking always to take revenge, or a person who was always looking to, that's the nature of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore they will continue that even after they're dead.
Wow. Really interesting. So then my question to you is past life regression. Part of what I think we even spoke about last time is like the things that you can be grappling with in this life that have come from a previous life that we're here to do a tick on from. And so why isn't it that we all do past life regressions to kind of work out what it is that happened last time that we could now be more conscious of working on this time? Is it encouraged? Or I know that it's apparently not forbidden, but why isn't it even more encouraged?
No, it's not forbidden. There are two problems. I always say there's two problems. Yes. Not always are there two problems. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there are no problems, right? But,
mostly two.
So there are two problems. First of all, it's done. The method of regression is done through a process of hypnosis, right? Mm-hmm. And the one that facilitates, the facilitator, is not always equipped to understand, well, what should we do about it? Meaning they can see the picture, they can hear they can get access to what's going on, but they don't know where we go from there. Mm-hmm. I'll explain to you in our normal days, in our normal way of living. People say that you're never given a challenge that you can't overcome. And that's not true, right? This is false. Because many times a person will fall into a situation and they could not have prevented that, right? There are many people that are challenged, chemically in their brains, and they can't overcome that challenge. Why does Hashem do that? Because Hashem wants to see how does a person cope with being put into a situation which they have no control over, right? And this can be across the board, whether it's mental or whether it's physical, whether it's emotional. Across the board, a person can fall into a situation or can be put into a situation by Kodesh Baruch Hu. Rav Matisyahu Solomon Zatzal even said that kids that go off the derech, also, it was a gzeira from Hashem. It was a decree of Hashem. Now, I'm not belittling the fact that there's still bechira. There's still freedom of choice. But nevertheless, you need to know that sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes the situation much more difficult than you are capable of being able. Because he wants to see how you cope within the situation that he put you into. Right? Now, therefore, using that as an example, when a person becomes aware of their past life, right? So they know kind of the area in which they need to work, but they don't know what it is that they need to fix. It's not like regression is going to tell you, well, the past lifetime, this is what happened to you and this is what you need to fix. It's not telling you that. Therefore, the Torah tells you, and I think I mentioned in that shir that you have, I mentioned that the Torah tells us there are two ways of knowing what you need to fix in this world. The first is, right, feel out your deeds. Yeah. Feel out your deeds means all the areas where you have a passion for. Those are the areas you need to be working on. And search out your deeds are all the areas where you keep tripping up on. So it's not like, rocket science. It's a simple thing. You fall into a situation, you say, I'm never going to do that again. And then you do it again. And you say, I'll never do that again. Okay, so that's the area you need to be working on. Yeah. The past life regression is only going to help you in order to give you the strength and the knowledge to know that what's happening to you in this lifetime is not random. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put you through these challenges because this is the challenges you need to face, but it's not going to tell you what you need to face.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love what you said last time about knowing. I've really been reflecting on that because I feel like for me, it's like almost quite obvious, both of those things in a way. And it's very motivating. It gives you a real focus in a way. So,
Right.
So just deviating a little bit to staying on the soul. When someone's about to die, I didn't know this until I was with my sister when she was dying. You're not meant to touch the body. It's called gosha or something. And wanted you, if you could explain why this is. And just one thing I wanted to tell you about it that was difficult for me is that because my sister was going through what we call beating of the grave when she was struggling, her neshama was fighting. It was almost like they kept thinking she was going to go, but it took 24 more hours. And not being able to touch her for that amount of time was incredibly difficult. And I have to be honest with you, I'm going to make a bit of a confession here. But there were times within those that I did touch her, and I saw that when I touched her, she totally calmed down. It's she was going through a lot of pain, and I could just feel she calmed down. So it was very difficult, but I didn't want to be disrupt the process as well of the neshama trying to leave the body and pull it back in. So can you tell us a little bit? Because it was something I'd never heard of before.
Right. So I have to clarify for you because I think that perhaps you weren't given the most accurate information. There are two situations of a person on their deathbed. One's called a shchiv mera, right? And one's called a goises. Now, shchiv mera is where they are not able to move around anymore, and they need to be on the bed, right? And that could take a long period of time. It could take days, it could take hours, but they're still in a position of where they're not getting off the bed. Let's put it that way. They're not going to be getting off the bed, right? And there's certain halakhas which apply to such a person. For instance, if a person makes how should we say, makes a request that, say, such and such a thing should be given to this child or to that cousin or to this, then that's as if they've written it, right, and signed and sealed. That's how powerful it is, signed and sealed. Mm-hmm. But then there's the period of the goises. The goises is not, it's not as people would imagine. Goises is really right at the end, already when there's more of even the gurgle, the death, things like that.
Yes.
Which is really it's a real momentary thing, and the only reason why you're not to be touching at that point is because it could hasten the death.
It could hasten.
So it could hasten the death.
Oh. So
where it's not like that, where for instance in the case where I think there was a student of mine that was also passing away, and she there was a woman that was with her, not her mother. Her mother was in another country, but somebody that she was very close to, and she was holding her hand the whole time, right? Mm-hmm. And she also noticed that when other people came into the room, the girl was already unconscious, but when other people came into the room, if it was a person she liked, mm-hmm. right, so then it would calm her down. If a person wasn't, it would start racing.
Yeah.
So agitate, right? So I think what people need to know is that they need to get a much clearer picture of when the person is considered a goises, right? At which point you can't touch anymore, right? In a hospital, in hospitals they sometimes are more accurate because they know exactly when not exactly, they don't know exactly, but they have a better picture. Where at home and places like that, it's not as clear, mm-hmm. right? So that's my only advice over here is people must get a much clearer picture as to when is the person considered a real goises and not considered goises. They're just a shchiv mera.
And just the misunderstanding I had is I thought that it was because the neshama is trying to leave the body, and when you touch them, you pull it back down. But you said it's almost the opposite. You said when you touch them, you're hastening death.
Right, right.
Interesting.
That's what I understand it. I can recheck. I can you heard from somebody else like that, or you were just understood?
No, I heard from somebody. I heard from somebody who was with us at the time. Yeah, helping us with this period.
You're holding it. Oh, so then you know what? Listen, I always say, whenever I teach, I always say, if you hear from somebody else, they're always right. Right?
Okay.
I'll double check. I'll double check on that. I'll double check on that. Right.
Okay, thank you. So the next question I have, I really wanted to ask you about, is about dreams. About what happens, and I know there's a bigger subject of dreams in general, but I was specifically interested in dreaming about our loved ones because I've been dreaming quite a lot about the people I've lost in the last 3 years, my best friend, my father, and my sister. And some of those dreams are very, very graphic with conversation, and some of them they're very vivid in front of me. And somebody recently said in another talk for this website that they had commented to me, not in the talk, but that it's not common to dream of our loved ones, and that you don't usually see their faces. That hasn't been my experience. I don't know if that means I've got an overactive subconscious or what it is, but I wanted to ask you about that.
Right. So let's first understand, when the Gemara says that if you see a person who passed away in a dream coming into a house, that means there's going to be peace in the house, because a dead person is somebody who's gone to a place of peace. That's why we say lech b'shalom instead of lech l'shalom, like we say to a living person. Lech b'shalom, because they're going to be in a state of peace. So when you see them in a dream and they're coming into a house, you know that's coming into a place of peace. Now, again, what people are telling you is definitely not incorrect, meaning sometimes our subconscious mind will definitely generate, dreams and visions and things like that, which are not coming from a different place, not coming from a higher world, they're not coming from anything. That's true. However, right, often HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or even the person themselves, will come to a person in a dream for one purpose, and that is really just to show them that they're okay. Because they worry about it, and are they okay? They're okay. So they come and often they look better. There are other situations where they don't look good in a dream. And then sometimes there is a bit of a conversation of such. It's not a real conversation, but it's a communication when they want them to do something because something needs to be fixed.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They maybe left a debt behind, or maybe they didn't take care of a situation they needed to before they left, and sometimes they can come back to communicate that, right, in the dream, that something needs to be done. And then what happens is the person takes care of it, and then they dream, the person comes back to them and says thank you, and it was taken care of, and et cetera, et cetera.
Amazing.
Yeah. Something you need to know about dreams, and this might put a little bit of a dampener on everything, but meaningful dreams, again, everything I say we take with a big pinch of salt, okay? Yeah. Meaningful dreams are only dreams where people who have lived a life of real innocence and naivety, meaning people who have spent a lot of time watching movies, reading books that contain fantasies, life fantasies, and therefore they've overstimulated their subconscious mind. Often their dreams are really just a continuation of that. Yeah. Right. So that's why I'm often, when I am asked to help interpret dreams and things like that, the first thing I do is I interpret it always positively, because it says in the Gemara that dreams go after the interpretation. So therefore, you always have to interpret it positively. The second thing is I point out to them, a lot of dreams are nothing more than just an overstimulated mind. And most dreams, every dream, will come always with about a little bit of nonsense in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to kind of work out what is and what isn't and things like that. But definitely, the two main reasons why it is good to see people in a dream that are passed on is, number one, that we feel better because we feel that in a better place and they look better, especially if when they passed away, they were not looking good at all. And then they come to you and they're looking good. That's really a positive sign.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing is sometimes, it could be a message, but you'd have to discuss that with somebody that really knows things if that ever happens.
I really feel like some of the dreams with my sister were her coming to show me that she's really fine, because it wasn't just she looked better, she looked incredible. She was vital and glowing and beautiful, and her message to me is that I'm free and I'm free to be me. And it was particularly after times that I was worried because of how much she'd suffered and etc. And it almost was felt like a response to that that I wasn't expecting. And and there was another time where it was on my mind a lot that I didn't do enough for her to protect her, my little sister. I knew that wasn't true, but my mind was grappling with that. And I had this vivid dream where it was almost like she was telling me, I was getting a sense of being how it was to be her, like almost on her deathbed, and that the person who was with me in the room was such a comfort. Just having them there, having someone who was calm and who was there. And it was almost like something that I learned. I woke up and I realized it was enough. That's all she needed, was for me to be there next to her and be calm, etc. So it was just interesting, those communications. Yeah. So the next question I wanted to ask you, which is really going back to the video that we spoke about, the first video, part one, what we're calling part one of this little mini series, is you spoke about the walls of chemicals that push our shameful experience into our subconscious. And you said when the body dies, those walls of chemicals die too. And so it's almost like you've got to feel that shame and everything you're pushing away. So I just wanted to ask you if I understand correctly, because I wanted to say from a psychological perspective, the way I understand that is that in this life, what we do as humans is that when we have a feeling of shame or something we don't like, we have these defense mechanisms, these ways that we can divert our thinking or distract ourselves by thinking about other things and doing other things and creating another feeling or another state for us. And then, part of psychological work is not to do that, but to actually sit with the feeling and think, and look into it and what's going on here. And that's the way that we can resolve things internally, psychologically, spiritually. And is it that afterwards you're saying we can't do that anymore? So we left with whatever wasn't taken care of, all those kind of feelings of shame, or is that what it is? Because I've never heard, and I really loved that the walls of chemicals, just that phrase was so new to me.
Right. So first of all, let me just clarify for you about these walls of chemicals. There is a difference of opinion as to whether the neurons die or they actually are created to create that wall. But it's definitely a wall of chemicals which is pushing everything into the subconscious, because otherwise everything would remain in the conscious. So it definitely has to be walls of chemicals that are pushing into the subconscious. However, you are right in the sense that we don't want them to remain locked behind those walls, because it means you never deal with it, right? So we want you to open up. We want to open up want to open up the walls, so to speak, and get access to that. Might be urgent. Just give me 1 second. Maybe I'm on a Zoom. Is it urgent? Bye. At 2:30. Bye. Sorry, Terry. At least people will see that I'm human. Right.
Just in case they
don't.
Elevate. Yeah.
Exactly. So so we do want you to open up. We do want to clean out and deal with those shameful, embarrassing situations, and heal from it. Once you do that, then you don't deal with it afterwards.
Yes.
Because there's nothing to deal with.
Yeah.
Right.
What I loved about it just is because, when I see clients and you see people and humans, and including myself, you want to work on these things because you know that they're having an effect on you. There's a way that they're having an effect on you if you're not dealing with them. They're limiting you in this life. But what was nice to hear is not only are they limiting you in this life, you're going to have to deal with them at some stage, because they don't just kind of go away when we die. Not just like nullified, you know?
That's what we said, right? You remember we said that I only teach us, right, how to die in order that people should know how to live.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then just so, you know, this is almost a similar thread when you spoke about anger. And it was interesting when you first said anger is an external expression of an internal hatred for yourself. I was like, what? Like, that didn't make sense. But then just to speak it out, what I understood is that, you know, you said it's like salt to the wound. When there's something we've gone through, some kind of trauma or experience, and then it's triggered by somebody's actions, it's almost like salt to the wound. What we generally tend to do as humans is get angry with that person who triggered it, that angry with that person, rather than looking back into what's going on here and resolving it internally. It's not to do with them. It's got to do with something in us that hasn't been resolved. It's almost the same thing. And again, like, that's not just for this lifetime. That's, you know, as you're saying, for the next lifetime. Otherwise, that anger has nowhere to go and almost turns in on yourself. And that's why you said it's an internal hatred for yourself, because it's not going anywhere else now. So it has to go to you. Yeah, exactly. Really love
exactly. that. You expressed that well. Correct.
Okay. So my next question is, how does the Torah view sadness? Because they say that a prophet or a Navi can't receive prophecy if they're sad. It's almost like that they're not a kli for it. So the question is, like people would ask, is can't we connect with Hashem when we're sad? Is that kind of blocked when we're sad? That's what I wanted to ask you.
So we have to be more accurate in the sense that it's not just that you know, is my internet unstable?
You're freezing a little bit. You have been, but not your voice, just your picture. So it's fine.
Okay. No. So we need to be a little bit accurate. What it says is that the Shekhinah cannot dwell in a place of sadness. Right? In other words, it's not so much the prophecy thing as the Shekhinah aspect of it. We need presence. We need God's presence, right? And that is only accessed through joy. It's not accessed through sadness. And we find that, for instance, that because Yaakov was in a state of sadness all the years that Yosef wasn't around, the Shekhinah wasn't with him.
Yes.
So now it's not that there should never be sadness. There needs to be sadness, right? There needs to be sadness. It's a realization. I don't know how to put this really, but it's a realization that there is some kind of barrier. That there is some kind of barrier, right? In other words, a person should realize that when you lose somebody, you've lost access to something very powerful that was able to give you wisdom and to give you some insight into Boruch that you don't have now. In other words, people aren't just servants that, you know, do things for us.
Right.
People, Hashem puts a person into this world because the person is a source of wisdom, a source of connection, a source of right. And when that person's not there, we have lost that access.
Beautiful.
And the more person brings wisdom into this world, the more access we've lost. And for instance, in a case of a leader, you know, let's say a great rabbi, for instance, when he passes on, really, we are all mourners because that person was bringing wisdom to all of us, right? So really, that's really what the sadness is about. The sadness is about the fact that we've lost access to connection. We could have connected to Shekhinah, we could have connected to Hashem, we could have. This person was for us a channel, a mentor, to be able to do that. Now we don't have that anymore. And that is on every level. For instance, a person loses a parent. The only way you can relate to Hashem as a father figure is through a father. If you don't have that father figure anymore, you've lost a root connection.
Interesting. But would somebody on the highest level, Avram, Venu, or somebody who's reached ultimate shleimus, would they feel the sadness? Would they feel sad? I mean, I know Yaakov did, but
They have to. It's no question of, look, that's a brilliant question, because there really is a contradiction. If you really believe, and you really believe that Hashem did everything, and that everything is just perfect, and you really should think to yourself, so there's no place for me to mourn, there's no place for me to cry, there's no place for me to be sad. But that's not true. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, you want access? Hashem says, you want access? This is what you have to do. It says, Kol hamit avel al Yerushalayim zoiche v'roet simchata. All those that mourn for Yerushalayim, they merit in the present tense, right? They merit in the present tense, and they see in the present tense her joy. What the Torah is telling us over there is, you can't get access to that joy without the mourning. So people who think that, just put it aside, don't go through the mourning, you don't need to have that. It's a mistake. That is the method. There's no other method.
Yeah. Really interesting. Really interesting. So the next question I have for you is just about visiting the grave. I've got my sister's Yotzad coming up. We've got a mitzvah in 2 weeks. I'm going to South Africa for this mitzvah. I don't really understand what the point of the mitzvah is. Like I'm trying to look it up so I can connect with it, the ritual aspect, what it's doing. And then what I wanted to ask you about is that I was trying to look it up in this book, which is a beautiful book written by Rav Zvi Hebel called The Neshama Should Have an Aliyah. And one of the things he wrote about visiting the grave is he says, it brings pleasure to the deceased when their loved ones visit their place of burial and pray for the welfare of their departed souls, from Sefer Hasidim. And then he also says, we found that the deceased pray for their children. Similarly, the prayers of the living on behalf of the dead do have an effect, also from there. And then one more, if not for the prayers offered by the souls of the departed for the welfare of the living would not survive for even 1/2 of a day. That was the Sfas Emes quoting the Zohar. So I just wanted to ask you about that, because you had almost mentioned how going to the grave can often be not good. It almost pulls the soul back down in a way, then gets them back involved here where they kind of almost don't need to be. So I wanted to ask you about that. It felt a bit contradictory.
Well, first of all, on a Yortzeit, that's always going to happen, that the soul's going to come back, right? So if he's speaking about when it's not a Yortzeit, okay, then we have a contradiction. If he's speaking about where it's a Yortzeit, so then there's no contradiction. Because
what's the significance of the Yortzeit? Why?
The Yortzeit is a period where the soul is given an opportunity to move to the next highest level. Wow. Right? In other words, that's why amongst the Sfardim, and even amongst us as well, we go through two different processes amongst the Ashkenazi. But amongst the Sfardim, it's called the Hilula. It's the soul going up, and they make very big parties, right? And there's like it's a lot of joy, it's a lot of simcha, and it's a lot of, because this is who wouldn't have a wonderful simcha for the fact that the neshama is going to a higher dimension, right?
Yes.
We split it. We sometimes in the nighttime we make a siyum and have a party, but in daytime we fast, right? Because it is a time where the soul is judged again. Don't forget that, right? Not the same type of judgment that took place in the beginning, but to go to a higher dimension, there has to be some form of judgment to go higher, So therefore, we want to encourage that. We want to help with that, etc., etc. And that, we go to the grave, we daven, we say Kaddish, we say psukim with we say verses with the letters of the person's name, all that kind of stuff. This is definitely for the sake of helping the person. And you need to understand that also with us, this is a day of judgment for us as well. Especially if it's a close relative, it's a day of judgment for us as well, in that sense. So it's really both.
Can I just ask you about that, Rabbi Smith? When you say that, is that because of the Ruach, that we're all part of the soul family?
Yeah, right. The part of the soul family, and the closer, obviously, the closer, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Friends, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's definitely a day of judgment, but it's not a negative thing. It's a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. Now, as far as the matzeva is concerned, I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I don't know, because in Judaism, the concept of a matzeva is a very interesting insight. First of all, many years ago, a matzeva was something that was very important to the Jewish people. It was like a method of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? It was like a sign of a bris, a sign of a covenant, make a matzeva. But then once the pagans got hold of it, et cetera, it was something that Hashem didn't want us doing anymore. So it cannot be the regular concept of a matzeva. It's not like the matzeva that used to be in ancient times. It's not that kind of a matzeva type of thing. This is a matzeva which basically marks the grave, so that the people for the later generations will know where to go. Mm-hmm. But it's not a holy experience. It's not some kind of spiritual experience. It's just so people later generations will know where to go, because if there wasn't a matzeva, they wouldn't know where to go.
Interesting.
The marker. You understand?
Yeah.
But obviously, in the world of Hasidus, in the world of Kabbalah, maybe there is deeper meanings behind it. I've never I never looked into it.
Yes.
I never researched it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something that I would like to do. Since you're bringing it up, maybe I would like to research and see what is the meaning behind a matzeva. But I really don't believe that there is any deep spiritual meaning behind it. It's just a marker point.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's similar to what I've read, what you're saying. So I appreciate that. Yeah. And
also, there's no period to put it. Some do it, like with my father-in-law, that we did it at the seventh day. In Israel, they just do it as quick as possible. The seventh day.
Yes, I noticed that. Yes.
Right. Some people wait till the 30th day. Some people wait till the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Almost the end of the year. Yeah. I hear that.